Hi, welcome back to the Knitweekend YouTube channel. I'm Haley. You can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Knitweekend, and this is the Knitweekend podcast episode number 2. So I am still very much trying to find my voice in this podcast, but basically it's going to take on the traditional format of telling you what I'm wearing, what I finished, what I'm working on, and other general thoughts and ramblings about knitting, yarn, and all the other things that go along with this wonderful hobby. So if you're new to my channel, that's kind of what this episode will be. I also have some mini episodes that I've posted that are a deeper dive on certain topics, also answering questions that were asked on the first full-length episode, so you can check those out. And just a quick introduction, since we are still getting to know each other. I live in Nashville, Tennessee in the US with my husband and our 2 pets, Georgie, Sweet Georgia Brown. She's made a few appearances here on the channel. That's our cat. And Buster Brown, who is our pit mix buddy, our dog. Anyway, I don't know why I got so hung up on who Buster is. We'll get on to the knitting now. So I guess I should start with what I am wearing. And I decided to throw this on today because I was watching a podcast this morning, Claudia's House of Knitting, and she is also knitting a pattern by this same designer, Joanna, and she was just raving about how well written the pattern was. I couldn't agree with her more on my experience in knitting this pattern. This is the Koyamae Pullover. I knit this over the winter this year, and it's a wonderful saddle shoulder construction, which is my first time working a saddle shoulder, which I can't get enough of. With cables going down the sleeve and then a stockinette body. If you want details about all of the gauge, needle size, all of that, you can find those details on my Ravelry. I did make a few mods due to my gauge being off. This pattern is actually designed using Knitweekend and a strand of mohair held together, but I went a little bit rogue, admittedly. Last year at my local fiber festival, I had picked up some of this yarn. This is an Icelandic sheep yarn from Buckmaster Family Farm. I don't think they have an Instagram or online shop or anything like that. It is a 2-ply Aran weight. I would have to say it's woolen spun, because if you look at how lofty it is, has a lot of air in that ply, and so I decided that this would be a fun yarn to sub out for the Knitweekend Unspun. I could not be happier with how this sweater turned out. It's exactly what I had in mind for this yarn. It's rustic and yet also airy and delicate all at the same time. This sweater wears like a sweatshirt. It has been my favorite thing to put on for the past couple of months. So some mods, wow, my hair is doing weird things today. Okay, so some mods that I did to this sweater. For one, I ended up putting in a double folded collar. So the pattern just had a single 1x1 rib collar. I really love a double folded collar. Little fiddly to learn how to work, but I like that it provides a bit more structure and keeps that from stretching out. And the other mod that I did was I ended up doing 10 cable repeats of the sleeve and then shortening the cuff. I don't know if it'll focus on the cuff for you. There you go. It is a little cable cuff. And so I ended up just shortening that. I think I shortened it by half. So I think the cuff was originally designed to be twice as long as it is. And I just decided that for my personal style, a shorter cuff was going to be better. So if you'd like to see a full photo of me wearing this, you can find that both on my Instagram and on my Ravelry. As I mentioned in one of my mini podcasts, a little hard to stand up here because the camera is so close to me. I don't really have room without upsetting my whole apple cart. So you can find those details there. So I want to just do a quick edit here, and I'm hopeful that I can pop this in a place where it doesn't seem like complete stream of consciousness rambling. One of the things that I did in my mini podcast, the one about the subscriber Q&A, is I talked about some patterns that I'm finding inspiration from some of my recent saves on Instagram, and I got a lot of people saying, hey, we really like that because we like to discover new patterns. So I thought, since I am obsessed with this saddle shoulder construction right now, I would just share with you a few other saddle shoulder patterns that I have saved recently on Instagram. At least 2 of these are in my knitting kind of dreams for the rest of the year. And what I've done too is that you can go on Instagram, and I've published this into a guide on my thread so that you can see all of these patterns right there together. If you don't have Instagram, that's okay. What I am gonna do is, when I get to the end of the pattern preview, I'll just pop up a little screen with all of them, and then that way you can hit the pause button, jot down the notes that you need, and then come back and replay the rest of the video. So the first pattern, saddle shoulder pattern that I wanted to share with you, is also by Joanna Ang. This is one that if you want a fancy saddle shoulder, the Gemma, you can let me know which one is correct, Gema sweater. And it is, gosh, just a lovely cable sweater. It's got a gorgeous cable and twisted rib panel down the front, and her signature cable sleeves. The next one, okay, so let me just go ahead and issue this disclaimer. Anytime I do a pattern roundup or show you patterns that I'm inspired by or excited to knit or have loved to knit, you're probably going to get an Ozetta pattern. Her just classic aesthetic is everything that I love in knitting. So the next saddle shoulder sweater that I am loving is the Lakes Pullover. And this one has a bit more of a relaxed silhouette. And yeah, I just love how classic and just what a great everyday wear sweater this is. Also, she was inspired to name this and knit this sweater while she was on Lake Superior up in Minnesota, and I have a soft spot in my heart for the upper Midwest, Lake Superior and Lake Michigan especially. So gotta love that connection there. The next one is the Boyfriend sweater. This is Lene Holme's Samsoe, Lene, who's the same knitwear designer as the cardigan that I'm gonna talk about as one of my finished objects this week. This one just has a much sleeker styling, still really gorgeous, and I just could picture this as a great all year round sweater. It's not too thick, not too thin. I don't recall what yarn it's knit in, but I feel like it's very versatile. Then if you want something with buttons, I have the Wandering Cardi. This is by Atelier Cliche, and he just has a fun kind of square grid panel down the front of the cardigan with stockinette sleeves and a saddle shoulder construction. So I love this one. I've got some yarn in my stash that I think would work nicely for this. Then we have the Elevated Loop sweater by Other Loops. I'm really excited for this one. This one also has a shirt yoke construction. So this construction I first encountered in Elizabeth Zimmerman's Knitting Without Tears book, and hers is less a pattern, more just a framework, but it's knit bottom up. And as you know, I'm not the biggest fan, or as you'll learn, I guess, I'm not the biggest fan of bottom up sweaters. So I've been waiting to see if I could find a shirt yoke construction knitted top down, and I think this one is just that. So I'm very excited for this one. It's not quite out yet, I don't think. And then finally, the late summer wrap. This is from Knitting for Olive, and this is a cropped wrap sweater, and I think this would be just perfect to go over your summer dresses. It's styled here with a pair of light jeans. Yeah, this would just be like a great date night sweater option. So that's my roundup of saddle shoulder sweaters that I'm inspired by at the moment. You can find them on my Instagram guides, or you can press pause right now. I will post them and then press play when you're ready to rejoin the rest of the knitting ramblings. Oh, another thing that I forgot to mention, in episode 1, I showed off my husband's sweater that I had finished knitting him, that he knew was being knitted, didn't know it was finished, that I was going to gift him for his birthday. His birthday is tomorrow, but the cat is already out of the bag because after months of asking him to try the sweater on for me so that I could figure out the right length of the sleeves and body, he finally came to me this week and said, "Hey, can I try that sweater on?" And as much as I tried to say, "Oh no, I'm not feeling it, I don't really want to work on it right now," he kept on pushing and kept on pushing, and finally I just had to yell, "It's done! You can't try it on because it's done! You get it for your birthday." So he's not seen that sweater, but I told him he still has to wait even though he knows that it's done. So I will give that to him tomorrow. And you can look back at episode 1. It's just a basic raglan, nothing fancy there. Okay, the other, we'll start with finished objects. I'm struggling to get my flow today. We had a storm last night. I did not sleep well. Yeah, today's been a struggle all day. So if that translates into the podcast, bear with me. Come back for episode 3. Don't give up on me yet. Okay, finished objects. Let's start with what I'm gonna call my RFO, my refinished object, because this one I actually knit over a year ago. And I decided to go back into it and make a few changes. And this is my 3 days cardigan. It's gonna blow out. Again, photos available on Ravelry and Instagram, before and after photos actually for this one. This is my 3 days cardigan, and this one, I've made a few mods to the original pattern, first of which is the sleeves. It was intended to be long sleeve. I shortened it to be just above my elbow. But the original pattern was knit bottom up. You started with a 1x1 rib at the bottom, and then carried that up, split for the front and back, and then added your sleeves. So my challenge with bottom up sweaters, which I think is a challenge for a lot of petite people, is that the body was just way too long once I ended up knitting it to the pattern specs. I have a really hard time sometimes judging the length of the body when I'm knitting bottom up, and where the armholes will stay. So if you have any good advice on how you manage that, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. So this sweater ended up being much longer than I would have liked, and I didn't like the 1x1 rib hem at the bottom. It caused the bottom to really splay out in a way that just was not attractive to me. So what I did instead was I took off one whole button length, and then bound off again in an I-cord. And on the I-cord, to keep the same flare out from happening, I used the method that Petite Knit offers in her Cumulus blouse pattern, which involves just knitting a couple stitches, knitting 2 together every so many stitches, so that you don't have that I-cord kind of flare out and splay out at the end. So I really super pleased with this now. I've worn it a ton, and I'm looking forward to wearing it into the spring and summer. Now, you may call this an autumnal color, but for me, autumnal is all year round. This is, oh, by the way, this is Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in the shade Copper, held double. So Yeah, so pretty pleased with this first refinished object. Shall we move on to the finished objects? Okay, let me just press pause for a second. I'll go grab them and I'll be right back. All right, let's carry on with finished objects. So this episode is gonna be more finished object heavy than most. That's because I had a really great combination of larger and smaller projects. And I happened to finish one each week between the last time we filmed an episode and this filming. But that also means I'm a little light on the WIP content this week. So anyway, let's start with finished objects. The first is my Mouline cardigan. This one, when you saw it last time, had sleeves, but no hem, no cuffs, and no button band. So since then, it has been finished. It has been blocked. This knit was great. It was just what I needed after coming off of that complicated cable design. It had some soothing stockinette throughout, but used a gorgeous yarn. I chose for this yarn from my stash. This is another yarn that I picked up at last year's Fiber Festival. This is a 3-ply sport yarn with 3 different colors of natural wool. Took me a while to find the right pattern for this, but when this cardigan came up, I knew that it absolutely was perfect for it. I actually backed into this pattern through my gauge. So I knitted a couple gauge swatches, found the one that I liked the best for the fabric, and then found a pattern that matched that gauge. I think that's probably why this is one of the best fitting cardigans that I've made, because, you know, I knew my gauge was spot on from the start. So hate to break it to you, but if you're somebody who has a problem with your fit and you don't gauge swatch, now we all go rogue sometimes, don't get me wrong, but if you want a good fit, you've got to swatch it. There's just no two ways around it. Okay, so what do I want to share with you about this knit? First of all, what drew me to this pattern was the shoulder construction. This shoulder construction has a very tailored look to it, and it's a really unique way to pick up stitches to go into the shoulder. So it's a paid for pattern. I'm not going to give too much away. But the shoulder construction is really quite special. And then also another thing that gives this cardigan a really great tailored look is the button band. And I think I said in episode 1 that this button band was double knit. That is wrong. It's not. It's 1x1 rib. It is applied after the body of the cardigan is knit and is a little fiddly for me to work, but one thing that I did that helped tremendously in working on the button band, specifically with picking the button band up, is I gave this a steam block before I picked up my button band stitches. So what I mean by that is I took a towel, I wet it, I laid it over the cardigan, and then I ironed the edge of the cardigan and then pinned the edge down to let it dry. And so that just kind of, I didn't stretch the edge or anything like that, just, you know, laid it to its natural shape and pinned that down. And that really flattened the rolling stockinette edge, and it allowed me to see where the button band should be picked up. Let me see if I can undo these buttons and show you. Oh, I should add, these buttons are not permanent buttons. They are just temporary buttons. They're what I happen to have at my house that fit. We are headed on a trip in a couple weeks. Exciting trip. I'll tell you more about that at the end of the podcast, maybe. And so I plan to visit Brooklyn General Store. I've admired them for so long online, and I want to pick up some notions there, specifically some buttons. So I did knit myself, oh, here we go. I knit myself a little mini button band to take with me since I won't be able to take my full cardigan. Isn't that so funny? All right, so that's my mini button band. This one will travel with me to help me pick out new buttons. But back to the actual button band on the cardigan. You can just kind of see how lovely and clean that line is. I mean, I know that part of it is that I used a marled yarn, and so visibly it's very difficult to see the divide here, but I think even if you were using a regular yarn, it would still be not very noticeable where your body of your cardigan goes into your button band. And I have to say, I think this may be my favorite button band construction that I've ever worked. So there is a pretty good likelihood that I will end up switching out, substituting this button band method for future projects as well, because I just think it provides just the most beautiful, clean button band. I know you're wondering, okay, she's talked about this perfect fit. What does it look like on her? So I should be showing you right now some B-roll of me wearing this cardigan. It's slightly cropped. That's because I wanted to be able to wear it to work. Yeah, I just love how classic this is. I think this is a wardrobe staple that's going to be around for quite a while. All right, next finished object. This is one that I think half of the world has knit. I might be the last person to have knit this project. This is the Vertices Unite. So it's done. And, oh, that's backwards. I showed you the wrong side. How about the right side? Yeah, okay. So thoughts on the Vertices Unite? Really struggling to formulate thoughts and words today. Okay, thoughts on the Vertices Unite. This is a pattern that I know is beloved by so many people, and I have to say, the finished object I do like. There was something about the rhythm of the increases in the short rows and the, alternating colors, that just the rhythm was off for me. Maybe I wasn't in the right mindset. I don't know. I totally went rogue on this one, guys. In section 2, you're working some short rows, and my preferred short row method is a German short row. And let's see, I think you can see here in section 2, you use a short row method to create those gorgeous lines. And I just really struggled to get my stitch count right. So by the end of section 2, I had thrown the stitch count out the window and just basically used the pattern as a framework to carry on. However, I think it still turned out pretty nicely. Only this one little section got a little wonky on me. I think everything else looks pretty well as intended. The size, however, is perfect. It's just what I want. I wanted just like a little spring scarf to wear. I had specifically Easter in mind, and looking to Mother Nature for the color inspiration on this one. I thought it'd be really fun to have something that had a bit of spring green, maybe some pink, like the cherry blossoms, and that's what we got. So I've worn this a couple times. I've styled this with my Road Tripper tee right there. And then also just with a plain white t-shirt. I just think you can't go wrong. So I do really like this, and the size is perfect. The yarn that I used, you can find the full color listing in episode 1, but it is Isager Alpaca 2. That is a 50-50 alpaca wool yarn. My first time using that yarn, I really enjoyed it. I would use it again, quite soft, next to skin, it's perfect. This one is a small one, and you might be wondering, Haley, what are you doing knitting winter accessories when it's gorgeous and sunny outside? This is the Biker's Balaclava by Witre design. Witre design. She is a Norwegian designer, and most of her patterns are originally written in Norwegian. They are definitely geared toward Nordic audiences, so they're written in that Nordic style. They're not gonna hold your hand too much. They're gonna just give you a framework and a direction to go in, and then the knitter gets to make a lot of the actual choices. So it won't tell you, you know, pick up 3 of every 4 stitches. It's going to tell you pick up 19 stitches across 20 rows or something like that. That's a really bad example. 19 stitches across 20 centimeters, not rows. I knew I was going somewhere with that. Oh my gosh, this episode, guys. Yeah, this is gonna be tough even in editing. So anyway, so it's not gonna hold your hand quite as much. As I was knitting this, I did what I love to do on projects when I can, is to use a part of the project for gauge swatch. So you start at the front of the top of the head right here, and then knit back. And so I knit that section, and then I blocked that section to check on my gauge. This, if it looks small, that's because it is. She says in the pattern, this is designed to be a tightly fitting balaclava, which is what I wanted because they always seem to be too large for my head. Now, I will admit that when I finished this, I think the first thing I said to my husband was, my knitting is trying to strangle me. So because I do not like to pick out a sewn bind off, I ended up, before I bound off, I did go ahead and block this to make sure that it was going to fit on my head without strangling the life out of me. It does, it is snug, but I wanted it that way so that it could go under the hoods of my jacket. And I will give it a reblock so that the edge of the bind off is a bit nicer, because right now it's still a little kind of wonky on me. This is knit in Cascade 220. I have to be honest, had not tried it before, wanted to see what all the rage was about that all the other Instagram YouTubers are talking about. So I have that here. This is the color Walnut. I am just really loving, camouflage. I am just really loving the walnut colorway right now. I've also used that in my Vertices Unite. One of my Alpaca 2 colors was walnut. It is, if you're looking for like a warm brown with a little bit of a gray undertone to it, walnut is the way to go for that. Okay, so let's talk about Cascade 220. This is non-superwash. This is one of the heathers, and I got the heather because I just really love the dimension that a heathered shade brings, especially to a commercially dyed yarn. It is a nice round yarn. I could see where someone would want to use this for cabling. I could see where it would be really good for color work because it's not slippy at all. It has a pretty good tooth to it. My only thing is this. I've gotten so used to using really lofty yarns or yarns that are more unique and or have a lot of bloom or just something kind of off the beaten path about those yarns. And so because of that, this yarn just felt not as exciting as, you know, this yarn, you know, or this yarn. But I do think that it has a place because for a hard wearing outerwear or maybe a gift knit to somebody who you're not sure what type of wool or yarn they can tolerate, then I think that the Cascade 220 would be a great option. Also really affordable. I think it was like $11 a skein for 100 gram skein, which, you know, in the US, yarn can be very expensive. If you're overseas and you're one of those people buying a skein of yarn for €3, yeah, everyone in the US, we're jealous of that. We wish we could buy something for just $3. No, that does not exist here. So yeah, so it has its place. I don't know that I would use it for, you know, a lot of my projects that I have planned this year. But there will be other projects knit out of it. Actually, one of them is coming up in my whips section. Oh, please don't hate me if you know that Cascade 220 isn't my favorite. I know you guys love this yarn. Don't hate me. All right, this will be a fun transition to whips. Because this counts as a whip. I mean, it's finished, this one, but there's only one and there should be two, right? So after I knit the Biker's Balaclava, I did just want to knit a hand warmer, easy hand warmer, to go along with it. So these are both intended to go on our upcoming trip to Norway. So we are headed to Copenhagen in Norway in just a couple weeks. And I know it's going to be cooler there than it is here because we're already in the 60s and 70s here in Nashville. And so I would anticipate we're probably going to be in the 40s. We might be lucky to get to the 50s. So I wanted just some extra snuggly things to take with me. So this is the Purl Soho pattern, the essential, from the essential set. There's a beanie, hand warmers, and mittens. These are obviously the hand warmers. Very simple. The only couple mods that I made, the gauge for the Purl Soho pattern calls for, I think, an 18 stitch gauge. I wanted to knit something on a bit smaller gauge. So based on my experience with Balaclava, I knew that I would be about a 20 stitch gauge for the needle that I wanted to use. And the reason that I wanted to do that is that I wanted these to be knit very tightly, so that I didn't have a lot of, wind coming through them. And then the other thing that I did, I didn't want to deal with the bottom of the cuff rolling up because this is a worsted weight yarn. So I just did a little bit of 1x1 rib on the arm. And then my final mod was the bind off. The original pattern calls for just a regular bind off, binding off in pattern the way you always would. However, I don't super love the look of that bind off. And since I knew that the bind off would be visible in this pattern, I went back to Elizabeth Zimmerman in her Knitting Without Tears book, which I would argue is the opposite of Knitting Without Tears. But anyway, and I used her sewn bind off to create this edge. It provides some flexibility, so it's a bit more, oh, we are out of focus. So it's a bit more flexible than the other bind off, and the edge doesn't roll quite as much as you're used to when you bind off regularly in Stockinette. If you're like me and you need I should probably tell you what that sewn bind off is. So her sewn bind off for Stockinette and garter stitch is basically you're going to go into your first two stitches purlwise together, leave them on the needle, then you are going to go into the first stitch knitwise again and take that stitch off the needle. Then your next two stitches purlwise together, leave them on the needle, first stitch knitwise, take it off the needle. If you're like me and you're a very visual learner, I did find a great tutorial for this on Purl Soho. So I will link that in my knitting tips playlist so that you have that handy if you decide that you'd like to make these. Or just frankly, anytime you're going to bind off in Stockinette or garter, I think this sewn bind off is really lovely. It's worth the time and effort to learn it for sure. Okay. So we can move on to some other whips now. I think I mentioned that my whips are a little sad at the moment. That's because I've been trying to just basically get stuff wrapped up. And thinking ahead to our trip, I came to the heartbreaking decision that I was going to have to limit what yarn I carried with me. Because I just don't have room. We're just taking backpacks. So the more yarn that I take, the less yarn that I get to bring home. And if I have to prioritize, I'm gonna bring home all the yarn. So our whips, I should grab my whip. Hold on, I'll be right back. Okay, all right, so this is my, I mean, I guess if you consider the hand warmer is definitely still a whip because I need the second one. But my only other whip right now is the very beginning of the Cumulus Tee from Petite Knit. I am using deep stash yarn on this one. This is Knitting for Olive Pure Silk. This is the color Cardamom. I'm quite confident that it's not going to show up on the camera very well. It is definitely kind of in that same brown, brownish, grayish taupe color wheel. But I say deep stash because this is actually one of the first yarns that I bought when I started knitting, only to realize I definitely was not going to be knitting on needles that were that small. Hang on, we've got some movement outside. Okay, sorry about that. This is real life. The husband and dog are home, so had a little bit of movement outside the door. Anyway, so I quickly realized that the KFO Pure Silk was not really designed for a beginner knit, and I put it aside. But what I'm excited about for this yarn and this project right now is it's going to be a great travel project. I normally would not choose to work on 3.25 millimeter needles. That's what I'm working on for this project. Ordinarily, that would sound a little painful to me. But it will be a really good thing to have on the trip because it'll give me plenty of knitting, and I definitely will not run out because 0% chance I will finish this in 2 weeks while we're traveling. So that is why I chose to cast on that project. You probably won't hear too much about it because I figure you know about it already. But I do have other knitting plans coming up once we return from our trip. It is going to be the beginning of May when we're back, which in Nashville means we are gonna be in the 70s, possibly 80s degrees Fahrenheit as far as temperature goes. So I'm going to do something I thought I would never do, which is give cotton yarn another chance. When I first started knitting, I did a huge yarn haul of Pima cotton yarn, and I hated every minute of knitting with that Pima cotton yarn. It just was unpleasant to my hands, and frankly, the fabric that it created, I made poor yarn substitution choices, and anyway, it just really turned me off. But recently I was watching the Knitflix and Chill podcast, which if you haven't watched that, and you're interested in going deeper on yarns, pattern design, that sort of thing, I highly recommend it. They did an episode on yarn substitutions that I found really interesting. And one of the comments that they made was that if you have only ever knit with Pima cotton yarn, that's not probably gonna have been that probably wouldn't have been a great experience for you, and you should try some other cottons. They specifically recommended organic cotton. So I naturally had to pick up some cotton yarns. The first one that I chose, and sadly this has been discontinued, but I chose Fibra Natura in Papyrus. Is that focusing at all? There we go. Fibra Natura and Papyrus. So this is an organic cotton and silk combination. So this is 78% organic cotton, 22% silk. This is the color Gardenia, which is also, I think, on some websites labeled natural. The reason why I settled on the organic cotton and silk combination is because there's a fantastic Instagrammer, Valentina Colombi. Anyway, she has the most interesting yarn selections, and that's because the town that she lives in Italy, there is a woman who comes there and sells dead stock yarn once a month, sets up a yarn shop and does dead stock yarns once a month. So she ends up with some really gorgeous yarns. Now, I can't purchase those dead stock yarns, but I have messaged her a few times when I've seen something that she's used to say, hey, what's the fiber content on that? So recently she posted a summer tee, and I just loved the structure of the fabric that she made. And she said that it was a cotton and silk yarn. So that's why I got this. I didn't just get it in gardenia. I also got it in black. So I figured since it's discontinued, these are two good staple colors just to have around. So plans for this. Okay, we're definitely going back to Witre design on this. Either the Colette tee or the agate tank top. I have knit both of these before in different yarns. The Colette tee I did in a fingering, superwash merino, and a mohair held double. Love that, but it's more of a fall yarn combination. That substitution actually worked out quite well for me, frankly. So I'd like to knit one to make it more of a summer knit. And then the agate top was, well, one of my early knits, and well before I learned the importance of a gauge swatch. So that one would have fit a toddler, but did not fit me and was subsequently frogged. It was knit out of Pima cotton, and that's one of the projects that ruined me for cotton. So we're gonna give cotton another go. We'll see. The other cotton yarn that I picked up, this is a cotton and alpaca yarn. This is Puno from Pasquale Yarn. This is 70% cotton and 30% alpaca. And this one is going to be used as the base color for my intarsia top. I have plans with another knitting friend, Hannah G Knits, which she has on Instagram and also on YouTube. She does have a podcast as well. She and I are going to knit an intarsia top together this summer because we both want to try the technique and didn't want to go it alone. So, or thought it would be more fun with a friend. I would have gone it alone. I think she would have too. But anyway, more fun with a friend. So this is going to be my base color for that top. The contrast colors, we've actually done a little bobbin swap. So I wound up some bobbins for her from some of my stash yarn and sent that to her just this morning, and she's sending some to me. So that will be fun to have. It'll be a good resourceful use of yarn. So those are the cotton yarns and upcoming summer knitting plans. If you've stuck around this long, thank you. You know, I figure if you're here now, then you've pretty well bought into what I'm up to, or you've been working on that knitting project and just not been paying a bit of attention to what I've been saying. But that's fine, because I do that too. So I guess I want to just kind of close out this podcast by asking you for help. My goal for this podcast is that I really want it to be a dialogue. I want it to be a back and forth, a conversation. So I would love to create some community here. And I've had several folks who've watched my minis and my first episode and made comments, and I've talked back, and I would just really love to invite you to do that. If there's anything that you saw here that piqued your interest, that you want to know more about, something that was particularly helpful, please let's talk about it. And if you leave a comment below, either I will respond or I will do another subscriber kind of question and answer section. Also, give the video a like if you don't mind, if you did like it or found something useful here, and then that will kind of help more people find the podcast as well. Oh, I said I would tell you about our trip and I didn't really elaborate. Do you want to know about our trip? Okay, well, I'm going to tell you because, you know, this isn't live, as Francesca would say, and you don't have a choice. So we are leaving on April 15th. So shortly after I'll post this, we're going to be headed out, and we're making a pit stop in New York for a layover. Then we will head on to Copenhagen before going on to Bergen, Oslo, and Tromsø, and then back to Copenhagen, back to New York, and then to Nashville. So that will be a full 14-day trip. I could not be more excited. I don't want to leave you with the impression that we are big jet setters, because we're not. Frankly, the past few years, the only place that I have traveled to outside of the South is to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and Detroit, and that's pretty well been it. My hair is doing just really weird things. But this trip was originally planned in 2020 and had to be delayed due to the obvious. And we were just excited to have the opportunity to rebook it. Even more exciting is the fact that I, between then and now, found knitting. So I think maybe that was one of those things that was meant to be. So excited for all the great yarn shops. May have booked my Airbnbs to be near them. So in Copenhagen, I know for sure we're obviously going to go to Knitting for Olive, because I need to see all those lovely colors in person. I would also like to go to, I can't think of the name of the shop off the top of my head, but it's where Cardigan is headquartered. So plan to go there as well. And then when we head to Norway, I'm super excited to go by the Hillesvåg production mill and be able to pick up some yarns there. Hillesvåg you really cannot access in the US. The only place that has it, I think in North America, is Wet Coast Wool out of Canada. And they only have a limited selection. They have a great selection of yarn, including Holsgarn Super Soft if you're looking for that. But I'm excited to pick up some Hillesvåg yarn. And then also in Oslo is Garntopia, which is one of my favorite shops to order from for yarns that I can't get here in the US. So that is going to be an exciting pit stop as well. Yeah, so if you have any tips for how to bring yarn home in small spaces, please leave them below, because I will need that. Also, if you've been to Norway or Copenhagen, or you, even better, live in one of those places, and there's something that I just shouldn't miss, please let me know. We are pretty off the beaten path travelers. I really haven't booked that much in terms of excursion. We're kind of just hit the ground and do whatever moves us type of people. So open to suggestions. Love a good, a good option for food. For I think beverages or adult beverages there are quite expensive. Shopping, art, museums. And in Norway, frankly, any of the hiking. So please leave your suggestions if you have any. And I will try to post probably one more mini episode before that trip, or perhaps schedule it to release while we're on that trip. But this will for sure be the last full-length episode. So before then, so if the channel is a little quiet over the next month, I haven't gone anywhere, and I will be back even better than before. Certainly, hopefully more coherent than this particular episode is, thanks to the late night storms. Definitely been on the struggle bus here, so thanks for bearing with me. And yeah, so we'll see you soon.